Welcome into another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wassman here with a very, very special episode, kind of putting a bow on the 2024 college football season. It's the PFF College 101, the top 101 players in college football based off the 2024 season. Dalton, it was an incredible year of college football. The first year of the 12-team college football playoff made the season longer than ever before, and it was very hard narrowing down the top 101 players, but I think we've got a pretty solid list here of what we thought were the top 101 players.
There is certain to be no controversy surrounding this at all, right? But no, it was really hard, especially on the back end of this list, to narrow it down. And I think especially we had some issues even in the middle part of this list ordering it. I mean, there's just so many great players that we watched all season, even going to be great prospects in this year's NFL draft and future NFL drafts, and the number of true freshmen that we had to fit in and try to figure out where they belong in all of this. And there's so many more great players who could have been deserving of these spots. But it's tough to narrow it down to 100 with as many great players as there was in college football.
There were so many great players in college football this year, and how we kind of made this list together is based off only this past season, so not 2023 or anything else is included in that. When we do our PFF College 50, previous years are going to be included in that. So guys, how they performed in their whole careers are going to be included. So PFF College 50 ranking the top 50 players for the upcoming season. The 101 is ranking off the top 101 players from this past college football season. And all of these rankings are based off the exclusive PFF stats that we have and are available to you guys with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com for full grades and stats on every player in college football and the NFL, the best betting tools on the planet. Of course, with the NFL draft season quickly approaching upon us, the best mock draft simulator on the planet is available with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com today. All right, we've been teasing it long enough. Here are the PFF College 101, starting off with number 101 to 91. And at number 101 is one of the most electric players in college football, Diego Pavia, the quarterback from Vanderbilt. Number 100, Lathan Ransom, the safety from Ohio State. Number 99, Kyle Kennard, edge rusher from South Carolina. 98, Josh Connerly Jr., the offensive tackle from Oregon. 97, Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. 96, Jalen Knoll, the wide receiver from Iowa State. Number 95, Tyleik Williams, the defensive tackle from Ohio State. Number 94, linebacker Drake Bowen from Notre Dame. Number 93, Armaj Reed Adams, the offensive guard from Texas A&M. Number 92, Bryson Daly, the quarterback from Army. And number 91, Holland Pierce, the offensive tackle from Rutgers. Who stands out to you in the 101 to 91 range?
Boy, I'm glad we have a 101st spot so we could get Diego Pavia in there, the impact he had on that Vanderbilt team, who honestly none of us thought would even make a bowl game, and they found a way to do that. Went 6-6 in the regular season, 85 passing grade coming over from New Mexico State with Eli Stowers and Jerry Kill added to the coaching staff, and just the heart and soul that he brought, right? Diego Pavia is like the ultimate college football quarterback, right? He was so much fun to watch, really tough runner, led all Power 4 quarterbacks in yards after contact on the ground, and it just felt like he brought a different attitude to Vandy football, right? And one of the signature moments of the season was their upset win against Jalen Milroe in Alabama, and that really set a whole turn of events. So, when you think about the ramifications that had in the SEC race and even in the playoff race, you could argue that one loss cost Alabama a playoff spot. But Pavia brought leadership to Vanderbilt. He's going to be back for one more year with Stowers, and they're going to be fun to watch again next year.
Yeah, I think one guy that I think some people are confused about why he's this low on the list is Kyle Kennard, the edge rusher from South Carolina. He's number 99 on our list, and he won the Bronco Nagurski Trophy, which is given out to the best defensive player in college football. So you might be wondering, how on earth is the best defensive player number 99 on the list? I don't think he should have won that award. I think it's pretty clear as to why we have him number 99 on our list. He had a great year for South Carolina, no denying that, but he had a 77 PFF grade this last year. That was tied for 74th among all edge defenders in college football. A lot of the sacks he had, were his pass rush win rate wasn't as high as his sack total was. And I think we've kind of proven at PFF, and at least we've tried to tell people, sacks are a very overrated stat, right? It's about how often you get to the quarterback, whether it be pressures or just beating your offensive lineman one-on-one. He was still very good at doing that, but he wasn't like the elite pass rusher that I think his sack total would indicate. So that's why, again, this is based off PFF advanced numbers, not just simple passing yards and rushing touchdowns and sack totals. It's why a guy like Kyle Kennard, even though the raw, basic stats show him as one of the best players in the country, when you look at the advanced numbers a little bit more, he's more a really good player that still deserves a place on this list, but not quite the elite player that I think a lot of people thought he was this year.
Yeah, no, I think it looked very good and obviously still worthy of a top 100 spot here. But yeah, no, sometimes the awards don't quite line up, and like you mentioned, it's focused on a lot of surface level stats and even sometimes just what team you play on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to number 90 through number 81 now. At number 90, Jacob Gardner, the center from Colorado State. At number 89, another Group of 5 offensive lineman in Addison West from Western Michigan. Number 88, Jack Kaiser, the leader of that Notre Dame defense, the linebacker. 87, Drew Aller, the quarterback from Penn State. 86, Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle from Michigan. 85, Oronde Gadsden, the tight end from Syracuse. 84, another quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. 83, Pat Bryant, the wide receiver out of Illinois. 82, Vernon Broughton, the defensive tackle from Texas. And then 81, Malachi Moore, the safety from Alabama. Who stands out to you in the 90 through 81 range?
Look at 82 right there and a big piece of Texas defense. I know we've talked a lot about Alfred Collins and the star that he is this year, but Vernon Broughton was fantastic for them too. The 8th highest graded defensive tackle in the country. 32 pressures, 4 sacks, just under a 13% pass rush win rate from the inside. And in the playoffs, he was big time too. 9 pressures and an 83.8 pass rush grade in those 3 playoff games for the Longhorns. Again, it was about replacing Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy up front. We talked about Alfred Collins and how great he was in run defense all year. We're going to talk about him again in a minute, but Vernon Broughton's a guy who should get a lot of recognition on one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in the country this year in Texas. I thought he did a fantastic job alongside Collins on that Texas defensive line.
I want to shout out Drew Aller. Of course, as a lifelong Penn State fan, it's easy for me to do that, but I think he's a guy that we were very high on going into the season, and we took a lot of flack for it, right? I think we both had him in our top 10 quarterbacks going into the year, and many people were saying, what are you talking about? Did you watch him as a sophomore? It's like, no, actually, did you watch Penn State? Because the supporting environment they had for Drew Aller wasn't very good between the receiving core, between the offensive line wasn't really that great, and the play calling was abysmal. You got a better play caller, Andy Koldenicki. The offensive line played a lot better this year. Receiving core is still a big issue. But I think he quieted a lot of critics, right? He had a really good year. Outside of that game against Notre Dame, I won't deny he was bad in that game against Notre Dame, but I think a big part of that was Penn State's receivers just inability to create any separation against them. He was the 6th most valuable quarterback in the country, according to a wins above average metric. 21 big-time throws, top 20 in America. That was kind of a big thing with him last year, was yes, he was excellent at not turning the ball over, but the big-time throws weren't really there. This year, they were there, and his 2.1% turnover-worthy play rate was still 21st in the country as well. So did a great job of creating some big-time throws while not putting the ball in harm's way either. He's coming back for another year at Penn State when really, if you declare for the draft, he might be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. So Penn State's very lucky to have him back for another year, and a lot of people think Penn State has his sights set at winning a national title, which they haven't done in nearly 40 years now, and bringing back Drew Aller is a major part of that.
No, absolutely. I mean, he was really good all season, really, until the Notre Dame game, and a big part of that was just a lack of wide receiver help. But look, bringing Penn State to the Final Four, regardless of the road you think they had in the playoffs or any of that,
yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that are going to consider them the favorite to win the Big Ten next year.
Absolutely. All right, let's get to number 80 through 71 now. At number 80, a true freshman safety in Coy Parrish from Minnesota. Number 79, Andrew Armstrong, a guy I'm really high on for the NFL draft, wide receiver out of Arkansas. 78, you have Kobe King, the linebacker from Penn State. 77, Brashard Smith, the running back from SMU. 76, Eli Stowers, the tight end from Vanderbilt. 75, Jordan Clark, the corner from Notre Dame. 74, Donovan Jackson, the offensive lineman from Ohio State. 73, D'Angelo Pons, the corner from Indiana. 72, Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. And 71, Riley Leonard, the quarterback from Notre Dame. Who sent it to you from the 80 through 71?
I'll tell you what, a guy down there for SMU that I really love his tape. The more and more I watch him, Brashard Smith for them. And I know Kevin Jennings had a breakout season at quarterback, but Smith was the engine of their offense, a dynamic player with electric feet, over 1,300 rushing yards, arguably the best receiving back in the country this year, 90.6 receiving grade, led all running backs, just a dynamic two-way player that really allowed SMU to have balance in their offense, right? Whether he was working working as a runner or as a receiver. You could very easily argue, I know Jennings was great and had the breakout, but Smith was their best offensive player this year, and I think he's going to be a fun name to watch, likely early on day 3 in this upcoming draft, because it's hard to define him. He's a former wide receiver from Miami. He played running back this year with SMU, and it's hard to define him so, kind of concretely as either. I think he's just an offensive weapon. I think we're going to have a lot of fun watching him in the NFL too, but he was fantastic for SMU this season.
He was fantastic. I want to shout out from the national champion was Donovan Jackson, the offensive tackle from Ohio State, and he should not have been playing offensive tackle this year. A lot of injuries led him to play that left tackle role for the Buckeyes. He really is a guard, and he's one of the best guards in the country. He had to kick out to tackle because of those injuries, and he held up amazingly. In the college football playoff, against some of the best D-lines in the country, he had an 86 pass blocking grade, no sacks allowed, no hits allowed, only 2 pressures allowed on 119 pass blocking snaps in the 4 games he played in the college football playoff. Again, against some elite defensive lines like Tennessee, like Oregon, like Texas, and like Notre Dame. He played some really good defensive lines out of position at left tackle, and he still put up an elite pass blocking grade as well. I was just blown away by Donovan Jackson, and I know so many people saying, oh yeah, they won the Natty because they had Jeremiah Smith, because they had the great running backs, because Will Howard played out of his mind, because Jack Sawyer was the leader of that defense, and all the other Caleb Downs, all those guys. One of the most underrated parts of why they won the national title was that they got stability at left tackle. When we thought when Josh Simmons went down with an injury, it might have been over for Ohio State with that offensive line. He stabilized that offensive line a lot, and I think Donovan Jackson, very worthy of being on this list.
As valuable to their team this year as any of those other names that you just mentioned, they're certainly flashier names, and none of that happens without the improvement that they saw from their offensive line in the playoff. Because you mentioned it, after Simmons got hurt the second half of the year, they did not look good. It was the reason they lost the Michigan game.
Yes.
Keep in mind, they lost that game 13-10. They couldn't block a soul, and Michigan's hard enough to block with your starters, but when you got multiple guys out for the season with injury, you're trying to block Mason Graham and those guys, it is tough. I'm not making any excuses here. Ohio State was better than Michigan. They should have won the game anyway, but when your offensive line is in shambles, as it was at that point, you can lose any game. The fact that they took that 3 weeks in between the Michigan game and the first playoff game against Tennessee and found a way to fix their offensive line and adjust their schemes to the strengths of it was as valuable as anything else that happened on their team this season.
Yeah, you mentioned that. It's a great point that also Seth McLaughlin was out for the year with an injury as well. So they lost 2 of their leaders on the offensive line, and they could have fell apart because of it. And Donovan Jackson, just I think as a leader in that locker room, and also just how good he played, very deserving of being on this list. Let's go through number 70 through 61 now. R.J. Mickens, the safety out of Clemson, number 70. Trey Harris, the wide receiver from Ole Miss, 69. R.J. Harvey, running back from UCF at number 68. Nick Nash, the wide receiver from San Jose State, number 67. Aeneas Peebles, a D tackle from Virginia Tech, number 66. Bryce Betcher, linebacker from Oregon, 65. Sean Dolak, another linebacker, at 64 from Buffalo. Our guy, Willie Lampkin, the interior offensive lineman from North Carolina, at 63. Colston Loveland, the tight end from Michigan, 62. And Jordan Tyson, the wideout from Arizona State, at number 61. Who stands out to you from 70 to 61?
Boy, that's like a list of a lot of my favorite players right there, I'll tell you. But I'll go at the top with Jordan Tyson from Arizona State. And I think his breakout for the Sun Devils really is a big part of what led them to the college football playoff. And I know he missed the Big 12 title game against Iowa State with an injury. He missed the playoff game against Texas with an injury, which I still sit here and wonder, had he been able to play in that game, would they have beaten the Longhorns? Because they really got it going on the ground with Cam Scadaboo. We knew they'd be able to run the ball coming into the season, but I think a big part of Sam Leavitt's development and this team being able to throw the ball downfield more often was Tyson breaking out down the stretch in the second half of the season. He was one of the best receivers in the country. 83.3 receiving grade for the season, 1,000 yards, over 10 touchdowns. I mean, he just is one of the best receivers returning to college football next year, and I think a huge reason that people are so excited about Arizona State. It's going to be different next year without Cam Scadaboo, who was arguably the best back in the Power 4 this year, but I think with Leavitt's development and Tyson's development at receiver, this is still going to be a high-flying offense and somebody to look out for in next year's draft too.
One guy I love, and Jordan Tyson is a guy that needs to watch out for next year's draft. One guy who's getting underrated, I think, a little bit in this year's draft is Willie Lampkin, the offensive guard from North Carolina. And it makes sense because he's 5'10", 270 pounds. He's 3 inches shorter than any offensive lineman we've ever seen in the NFL, ever. And he's about the 3rd lightest offensive lineman we've ever seen in the NFL. And yet, he was still dominant this past year. He was the highest graded interior lineman in the Power 4. He was phenomenal as a run blocker and as a pass blocker, and really at the Senior Bowl, Dalton, he still dominated out there, even though he's incredibly undersized, like severely undersized, and he still was dominant against some of the best D tackles in what is a loaded defensive tackle class and loaded defensive tackle group we had at the Senior Bowl. Willie Lampkin was still phenomenal. So just such a fun player to watch considering how small he is, but yet how good he is at the same time. Willie Lampkin deserves a big shout out here.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll see if he can play guard or center or if there's some gadget role he can play, but I'll tell you what, he was appointment viewing at the Senior Bowl, especially with how good he was and the types of guys he was going against, some of them darn near a foot taller than him. So, no, I think a spectacular season and a spectacular career between his time at Coastal Carolina and then at North Carolina. Just an incredible football player who really, you got to think at that size, especially on the offensive line, you're overcoming a lot of odds, and he did it.
Definitely. All right, let's go to number 60 through 51 right now. Colin Simmons, the true freshman edge from Texas at number 60. Mikhail Kamara, the edge rusher from Indiana at number 59. Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State at number 58. Derek Harmon at number 57, the D tackle from Oregon. 56, Chris Paul Jr., the linebacker from Ole Miss. 55, edge rusher TJ Parker from Clemson. 54, Quinshon Judkins, the running back from Ohio State. 53, Tez Johnson, the wide receiver from Oregon. 52, JT Tuimoloau, the edge rusher from Ohio State. And 51, Damian Martinez, the running back from Miami. Who stood out to you from 60 to 51?
Tell you what, we talked a lot this year about the Indiana Hoosiers, and I think, a lot of the talk was about Curtis Rourke and Elijah Surratt and the high-flying offense, but their defense, especially their front seven, was fantastic, and Mikhail Kamara was at the very, very top of that, right? 68 pressures this season, 88.5 pass rush grade, fifth among a loaded group of Big Ten edge defenders, really good run defender as well. I think something that got underrated was Kurt Cignetti bringing so many of those guys from James Madison. Kamara was one of them. On the defensive side of the ball, you talk about him, Jalen Walker, and Aiden Fisher at linebacker. He got C.J. West from Kent State as well. That Indiana defense was terrific all season, and you could talk about level of competition or what have you all you want, but even in their only two losses to the two teams that played in the national title game, their defense hung in for a while. I was really impressed, too, with their effort in the Notre Dame game. They just kept battling, and they couldn't figure it out on offense, but Kamara's returning for one more year at Indiana. He's going to be one of the best edge players in the country again next year, and he proved that this year.
Yeah, he and the guy right next to him, and Colin Simmons, are going to be two of the top edges in college football as well. I want to shout out, who's I going to shout out? Damian Martinez, the running back from Miami.
That's your guy.
He's one of my favorite players in this upcoming draft. He had a 94.3 rushing grade this year. Only Ashton Jeanty and Cam Skattebo had a higher rushing grade among all running backs in college football. And just spoiler alert, we'll get to Jeanty and Skattebo a lot later on this list. Martinez averaged 4.5 yards after contact per carry, second among Power 4 running backs as well. Damian Martinez, he kind of got lost in the shuffle in that Miami offense this year, just because everyone's talking about Cam Ward and how good he was, and Xavier Shep and all the other guys there, but lost in the fact was that I think Damian Martinez was phenomenal as a running back for them this past year. And yes, the raw rushing yards aren't there because he didn't get the ball as much as he probably should have in that offense, but he was still, in terms of how efficient he was still phenomenal for the Hurricanes.
Absolutely. It is going to be one where people go, what? I don't even know if he cracked 1,000 yards. I thought it was 900 something.
He was close. I got to look.
It was awfully close to 1,000, but I think you mentioned it. Every time he did get to touch the football, he kept Miami on schedule, and I think you mentioned it. The grades are something that really supports his case here, and he just, it's constant. It's 5, 6, 7 yards. It's running through contact. I mean, he's an absolute bull to tackle, and I'll be curious to see what kind of team wants a back like him. I know you've mentioned him as kind of a loosely a James Conner type of back, which I really like that comparison, but he's a keep you on schedule back, and he was an underrated part of Miami's team this year.
He had 1,002 yards this year.
Just got over.
I think he 2 yards over.
He got it in the bowl game.
Probably did. Yeah, he had a big run in that bowl game, so he actually absolutely did get that run in the bowl game. But all right, number 50 through 41 now for the PFF College 101 at number 50. Another running back, Travion Henderson from Ohio State. 49, another guy who's really underrated. We'll talk about him a lot in the offseason. Austin Romaine, linebacker from Kansas State. He has a case to be the best linebacker in college football going into next year. Sam Levitt, the quarterback from Arizona State, number 48. Jake Slaughter, my guy, 47, the center from Florida. 46, Cody Simon, linebacker from Ohio State. 45, Xavier Restrepo, the wide receiver from Miami. 44, Jay Higgins, linebacker from Iowa. 43, Dylan Sampson, the running back from Tennessee. 42, Josiah Stewart, the edge rusher from Michigan. And at number 41, Curtis Rourke, the quarterback from Indiana. Who do you want to talk about there from 50 through 41?
Boy, again, a lot of great players, but I'll tell you, didn't it feel like there were stretches this year when Dylan Sampson absolutely carried Tennessee? I mean, you talk about led the Power Four, I should say, with 22 rushing touchdowns, broke 70 tackles, 90.9 rushing grade, was 7th best in the country. It just felt like, in a year where their offensive line also wasn't great, and Nico Iamaleava was kind of developing. He got better in the second half of the year, but this was a different Tennessee team than we've seen in the past. We're so used to it being high-flying and the fast-paced Josh Heupel offense, and Dylan Sampson and their defense were really the identity of the team this year, even in times when they didn't block very well. Sampson just continued to carry them, continued to fight through tacklers, fight through contact. It was really a shame to see him get hurt early in the playoff game against Ohio State, because maybe that gets to be a different game if Tennessee can slow it down with the running game a little bit, or maybe not. Maybe Ohio State was just destined to do what they were going to do, but Sampson needs to get a lot of credit for carrying that Volunteers offense for long stretches of this season.
He was phenomenal this past year for Tennessee, and obviously they're going to have to replace him next year in that run game because he was so freaking good. But I talked about Austin Romaine before as maybe being the best linebacker in college football going into next year. One guy who I think is no question the best at his position going into next year is Jake Slaughter, the center from Florida, because he was the best center in college football this year, in my opinion. He should have won the Remington Trophy as the best center in the nation. He was the only center in the Power Four who earned 80-plus grades, both as a pass blocker and as a run blocker. And really, the reason why I thought he was the best center in the country this year, he was that good, and he faced a murderer's row of defensive tackles. Walter Nolan, Deion Walker, Omar Norman-Latt, Alfred Collins, Joshua Farmer. Those are just some of the guys he had to face and that Florida schedule this year. Florida played one of the hardest schedules in the country, and I think the hardest schedule in the country in terms of defensive tackle talent, and yet Jake Slaughter was still one of the highest graded centers in the country. So I think he was clearly the best center in college football this year, just considering how highly he graded and how good he was against some elite defensive tackles.
Insane work. They played Miami, they played A&M, they played Georgia, they played Texas, they played Ole Miss. There's probably one or two.
Even like Florida State with Joshua Farmer. Yeah.
They played Florida State, even still has talent on defense. I mean, they just, what he did to produce at that level against that schedule, you're absolutely right. I think he has to be considered the best center in the country going into next year.
Absolutely. All right, top 40 now for the PFF College 101. At number 40, another very underrated player, Chandler Rivers, the corner from Duke. 39, another corner we'll talk about a lot for next year and in next year's draft is Jermon McCoy from Tennessee. 38, Cade Klubnik, a big bounce back year for him, quarterback from Clemson. Another quarterback at 37, the national title winner himself, Will Howard from Ohio State. 36, safety Michael Taft from Texas. 35, Elijah Roberts from SMU. 34, James Pierce Jr., edge rusher from Tennessee. 33, Alfred Collins, D-tackle from Texas. 32, Walter Nolan, D-tackle from Ole Miss. And 31, Armand Membu, the offensive tackle from Missouri. A lot of great names we're getting into right now, Dalton, here in the top 40. Who do you want to talk about here?
I think you mentioned Cade Klubnik, and he's going to be a huge story next year because, look, this was a really young Clemson team that I really don't think was supposed to win the ACC this year, and Klubnik's improvement was the biggest reason for that. 89.3 passing grade after a 64.4 the year before on a team with not the best offensive line, not the best run game, and a receiver group that was really young and trying to figure it out. Well, now you look at Klubnik and Clemson going into next year, I think as the clear ACC favorite, I think as a clear playoff contender, and I'll tell you what, maybe even if they can figure out their offensive line and the run game a little more, maybe even a dark horse to try to compete for a national title because they are loaded with young talent. Their defense is stacked. We've already seen a handful of guys from that defense that are coming back, especially TJ Parker and Peter Woods, and you got Antonio Williams and Bryant Wesco and all those guys at receiver coming back. If Klubnik plays at the level he did this year or even better, we're going to be talking about him even higher on this list next year. That Clemson is the team to watch in the ACC, having already won it in a year where they really weren't supposed to. Next year, they're supposed to win the ACC, and they're supposed to dominate it.
He might be the best quarterback in America going into next year.
It's a thought. I think there's 6 or 7 guys you could consider for that list, and he could very well be at the top.
Absolutely. I want to talk about another quarterback, too. So we were pessimistic on Cade Klubnik going into the year. We were a little pessimistic on Will Howard going into the year as well. Really, what we talk about with Ohio State is kind of like the Eagles conversation that we have for the Super Bowl. It's like, okay, everywhere is so freaking good, but do they have the quarterback that can do it? Will Howard proved he could do it. He did. And there were so many times this year, Dalton, where they didn't have the dominant run game that we thought they would have, and yet they still overcame it because Will Howard was that good for them this year. He was 9th in the country with an 85.7 passing grade, 88.8 grade against Notre Dame, an elite defense in the national title game in the biggest spot. He seemed to always come up huge in massive, massive games for Ohio State. He proved us wrong. That was the big question with Ohio State was, okay, do they have the quarterback? The roster everywhere else is loaded. Do they have the quarterback that can win it all? And he proved he could win it all this year. So shout out to Will Howard for proving us and so many other people wrong, because that was really the big question with them. And he proved that he was still one of the best quarterbacks in America.
The improvement from Howard as a straight drop back passer, which he didn't do a whole lot at K-State with such a run heavy system, is a testament to just how darn good a job that Chip Kelly. That's what I was so impressed with, was just Will Howard and Chip Kelly being so synced up, especially through that playoff run. And I only kind of wondered to myself, with Chip Kelly taking that Raiders OC job under Pete Carroll, maybe he goes, hey, well, let's get Will in the building and see.
You have him QB3 in the draft, right?
Yeah, I mean, if the Raiders were to say use one of their mid-third round picks on him, I think they actually have 2 third-round picks. I think it would make some sense if they don't get one of the 2 quarterbacks early on, even if just for the rapport with Kelly and how much he believes in Howard. And he just did a fantastic job with him again. The improvement he showed, I think before the season, we're not sure he would have even been drafted. Because he was a pretty mediocre passer, especially in non-play action.
So reliant on play action, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, that's how Kansas State operates. But the improvement from Howard was really a huge story for the Buckeyes.
Definitely. All right, we got a couple more quarterbacks coming up in the 30 through 21 range. And at number 30 is Spencer Fano, the offensive tackle from Utah, going to be one of the top offensive linemen heading into next year. Jackson Dart, quarterback from Ole Miss. 28, Kyle McCord, quarterback from Syracuse. 27, Caleb Johnson, running back from Iowa. 26, Princely Umanmielen, edge rusher from Ole Miss. 25, Jaden Higgins, the wide receiver from Iowa State. 24, Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall. 23, Andrew Makuba, safety from Texas. 22, Donovan Ezaraku, the edge rusher from Boston College. And 21, Leonard Moore, the true freshman corner from Notre Dame. Want to say that's my fault on the Andrew Makuba. I know Producer Eli was pissed at me for getting it wrong earlier. That was my bad. When I typed it up, I was just obviously typing up 101 names, and sometimes your brain just short circuits.
Well, he was at Clemson.
He was at Clemson at one point.
Totally off, but
he was.
Clemson maybe can try to take credit for how much better he got this year, but he was terrific for Texas, obviously. So sometimes you make 101 guys here, and there's a typo here and there. It happens. But, I'll tell you what. Again, another set of great players here, obviously, in the top 30. Let me go to Iowa State real quick. And Jaden Higgins here at receiver at 25. We saw his partner over there, Jalen Knoll, earlier in this list. Both of them over 1,000 yards this season. Higgins led the Power 4 with a 90.5 receiving grade. 6'4", can make contested catches, super reliable hands, broke 12 tackles, 99.9, perfect receiving grade in the intermediate range. He's a tall possession receiver who very well could get taken on day 2 of this year's draft. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll, the 2 biggest reasons that Iowa State made the Big 12 title game. One, I believe they won. They went 10-2 or 9. I think they went 10-2 this season. I mean, Matt Campbell just continues to churn out talent at Iowa State, and they're going to keep competing in the Big 12, but they're going to have to replace 2 really good receivers. Yeah,
first 10-win season in program history for the Cyclones this year. Dalton, out of these players from 30 to 21, who do you think I'm talking about here?
Oh, you already know. We know. Everyone in the building knows who you're about to rant about here.
I got to talk about Kyle McCord.
Your savior. One
final time. Kyle McCord, the quarterback from Syracuse, my alma mater, obviously. He was very conservative at Ohio State, and he turned into a gunslinger for Syracuse this past year. 4,760 passing yards, nearly 450 more than anyone else in college football. 37 big-time throws, 6 more than anyone else in college football. He was the 3rd most valuable quarterback in the country, according to our wins above average metric. Just so impressed by Kyle McCord just completely changing everything about him. I don't want to say he played scared at Ohio State, but a lot of times he looked like he was playing not to lose, right?
He decided he was going to be Jameis Winston this year.
No, but not even like he was way more efficient than even Jameis Winston was in his years as well. So I think what happened was at Ohio State, you know how good your team is around you, and you say, okay, I just can't screw it up. And so he played very conservatively last year, maybe too conservatively. This year at Syracuse, hey, we're either winning because of me or we're losing because of me. And that he really just let it rip this year. So Kyle McCord, big shout out to him, and I think he made himself a lot of money for the NFL draft as well.
And that yardage mark that you mentioned, 47-60, an ACC single season record. And I'll tell you what, I love the quote for him after they upset Miami in that last game of the regular season. It all comes full circle, doesn't it?
Same day as Ohio State losing to Michigan as well.
It all comes full circle, and it sure did for Kyle McCord.
It absolutely did. I know Ohio State fans were like, hey, we won the Natty. I don't really care. But Kyle McCord, that was a pretty big day for him as well. But we went to another ACC quarterback in just a second. But at number 20, another quarterback, Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. At number 19, Jeremiah Love, running back from Notre Dame, the best running back in college football going into next year. 18, Wyatt Milam, offensive tackle from West Virginia. 17, Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina. 16, Xavier Watts, safety from Notre Dame. 15, Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback from Oregon. 14, Kelvin Banks Jr., the offensive tackle from Texas. 13, Tedero McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona. 12, Jack Sawyer, edge rusher from Ohio State. And number 11, Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end from Bowling Green. We're getting close to the top 10 now, Dalton. But who stands out to you from 11 to 20?
Well, you get Kyle McCord, and I get Shedeur Sanders. Because you know what? For as much of the not even controversy, just the criticism that Colorado faced this season. And look, I think you have to still consider 2 years ago they were the worst program in the Power Four. And in 2 years' time under Deion and Shedeur Sanders, they went 9-4, right? They made their first bowl game since, what was it, 2018, I think it was.
So, yeah.
Third best passing grade in the country at 90.5, fifth best turnover-worthy play rate at 1.3%. Look, this was still a team that was incapable of running the football. Their defense kind of slowly developed as the year went on. Their offensive line developed as the year went on, and Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, obviously, too, were the constants of this Colorado team and the biggest reasons that they still could succeed on the field despite the flaws on their team. Without question, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Without question, one of the two best quarterbacks in the upcoming draft. Shedeur Sanders and what he accomplished in his career at Jackson State and at Colorado needs to be recognized. I think just, again, had they won a couple more games, maybe it could have been even higher than this. And there's some great deserving quarterbacks in front of them. Not very many. I think we only have, two left? We had Dylan Gabriel in this set, and I think there's still one more to go. But, I mean, Shedeur was just fantastic again, and he had such another great season leading that Colorado program.
I want to talk about my OT1 in the NFL draft. That is Kelvin Banks Jr. He's been the starting left tackle at Texas since his true freshman year. Best year yet as a junior. He was the most valuable power four tackle corner, wins above average metric, 88.2 PFF grade, 6th among all tackles in the country. And again, a lot like the Jake Slaughter conversation we had before, Kelvin Banks Jr. played some elite competition this year. So he had 2 games against Georgia. He played Ohio State. He played Clemson. He played Texas A&M. He played Oklahoma and played Michigan. Those are all some of the best D-lines in the country. In all those games, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In 7 games against this league competition, 86.9 PFF grade.
That'll do.
Against those defensive lines. If he posted a 70 PFF grade, I'd be like, that's really good considering how good those D lines are. 86.9. It did not freaking matter. Kelvin Banks Jr. was a dominant player against whoever was lining up against him. He is, in my opinion, easily OT1 in this upcoming draft because of how amazing he was this year.
He was the best player on the best offensive line in the country. That's really what it comes down to. Elite pass protector, perfect fit for everything Steve Sarkisian wanted to do in his run game. The Clemson game especially, and you had called it out before the game even started with the mismatch that it could have been with their outside zone scheme. I mean, he just dominated Clemson on the way.
250 yards on outside zone alone. That's ridiculous.
I mean, I'll tell you what, in this upcoming draft, we've talked about it endlessly. We're going to continue to do so for two more months, so tune in. Just an absolutely perfect fit for a team like San Francisco or Miami, somebody looking for that Shanahan scheme, or even if he ever fell to Seattle, I'm sure Clint Kubiak would love him. Man, oh man, Kelvin Banks. I'm with you. I think he's the best tackle in this draft. It's very close with Will Campbell, and Will Campbell could move inside in the NFL, but he's just a spectacular player on the best O-line in the country.
It feels like 13 at Miami's the floor. There's no way he falls
I agree.
past
I don't
there.
know how you could let him get by there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we made it. The top 10 players in college football from the 2024 college football season, and they all deserve their own breakdown. So we're going to break them down from 10 to 1 individually. Dawn, Start us off with number 10, maybe the best, not even maybe, the best defensive player in college football going to next year.
I mean, the safety, Caleb Downs for Ohio State, transferring in from Alabama and being absolutely everything as a true sophomore they could have asked for. And what Jim Knowles asked him to do in this defense, moving around, playing a ton of different roles, especially in the playoff. I mean, there was kind of, they had some structures in their defense where he kind of sort of was effectively their middle linebacker from 8-9 yards deep. He could play a deep half. He's always around the football. And even as a true sophomore, and we saw it as a true freshman at Alabama, his instincts are absolutely off the charts. The more tape you watch on him, the more you love him. And he really could be a top 10 prospect in the NFL. Easily in the NFL draft in 2026. 88.9 overall grade, 9th among qualified safeties. And he's one of just 2 who had an 85-plus grade in run defense and in coverage. Caleb Downs, I would argue, is the best all-around safety we have seen since Kyle Hamilton, if not further back than that. His instincts are incredible. He's a terrific tackler. He always knows where to be. He's an incredibly smart player that Jim Knowles relied on. And I'll bet Jim Knowles would love for him to come with him to Penn State. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we're going to get one more year of Caleb Downs at Ohio State, and he's just a fantastic football player.
Some of the best safety prospects in my lifetime: Eric Berry, Kyle Hamilton, Derwin James. Caleb Downs is going to be in that group.
I think he's in that group. He has shown us everything. He would be safety 1 in this year's draft.
Oh, easily.
He would go top.
And that's crazy considering Malachi Starks is really freaking good as well.
He would go top to 10 to 12 in this draft. He's that good. He is just it's his football IQ and his instincts for me at such a young age. It's just incredible how smart he is and how he always knows where to be at any given time.
So we are always tasked, because Trevor Sikkema is way too busy to do this, we are always tasked with making the initial 2026 or initial big board for the NFL draft before Trevor can really dive in and make his own big board. Is he number 1 for us?
I think it's entirely possible.
I think he might be number 1.
Because I don't think there's a quarterback right now you could definitively say is number 1. And there's some other positions where we really have to dig in. He could be just the best prospect, and it depends how high a team wants to take a safety.
Exactly. I think that's the one thing is positional value. But if you're just ranking who the best football players are, I don't think there's even a doubt. I think Caleb Downs is the number 1 player.
He's the best defensive player returning in the country next season.
And the best offensive player is not eligible for next year's draft. So I think Caleb Downs, he might actually be our number 1 player for the big board in 2026. Number 9, though, is a guy that is going to be a top 5 pick in this year's draft. That is Mason Graham from Michigan. He was ridiculous, and he was almost single-handedly the reason why they beat Ohio State in that game, a lot like the Aiden Hutchinson game a couple years ago, where he was basically the reason why they won that game. Mason Graham was phenomenal as well. So Mason Graham, number 9 on our list. He has been ridiculously productive at Michigan his entire career. He has a 92.5 overall grade over his 3 years in college football. That's first among all defensive tackles in the nation. I know that's based off this year, but he's been elite this year as well. So Mason Graham easily, you said before, he's the safest player in this draft. I agree with you. I mean, he is just such an amazing player at Michigan for 3 years now. And we could have told you preseason when we made our 101, Mason Graham's probably going to be our top 10.
Absolutely. I mean, Michigan, best defensive line in the country, and that's, a team that struggled on offense in 7-5. But so many of those games that they won, it was because of Mason Graham, because of Kenneth Grant, because of Josiah Stewart, and just the absolute dominance that they bring week in and week out. I really believe he's going to be a top 10 defensive tackle at the very least in the NFL. Just an incredible year, an incredible career at Michigan, and one of the all-time greats to come out of there. He's just a fantastic player.
I think he's up there with Jalen Carter and Quinnen Williams, the best D-tackle prospects we've seen in recent memory. I mean, he's ridiculously good. Number 8, Dalton, we mentioned before, Caleb Downs is the best defensive player heading into next year. Well, his teammate is the best player in college football going into next year. Who's number 8 for us?
Just a ridiculous alien freak, whatever you want to call him, out at wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith. I mean, and I'm sure there's some who would argue you could put him higher than this. And it shows the talent level that we had in college football this year. But you're talking about a Julio Jones, A.J. Green level of freak with Jeremiah. 89.8 receiving grade as a true freshman under the brightest lights at Ohio State. 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns. I mean, just a one-handed catches left and right.
Oh, yeah.
The game-sealing catch on a big third down go ball in the national title game against Notre Dame, the best man coverage team in the country. I mean, Jeremiah, there's the level of hype for him over the next 2 years that there's going to be. I mean,
crazy.
He's going to be, as a wide receiver, pretty high in the preseason Heisman rankings because he's just this is a level of freak we don't see very often, right? And I know there's more and more wide receivers that come out and they're really good every year in the way football is designed now, but you're talking about I go back to Julio Jones, I think, with him. I think there's similar players, similar builds. It's just ridiculous how good he is at such a young age, and he keeps working to get better. So, look, whoever goes in there and is replacing Will Howard at quarterback next year, they're going to feel really good about their chances with Jeremiah on the outside.
So I tweeted out, he reminds me so much of Julio Jones during the Rose Bowl. And I remember someone tweeted back at me, like, oh, okay, Julio Jones is a little lofty. To me, he reminds me more of like Andre Johnson. That's still a Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
right? Like, we're talking like, oh, the floor is like
as if Andre is significantly lower. Yeah, no. Okay, so, well, he's not this level of Hall of Famer. He's this one.
It's just like, okay, cool.
You can have
whatever you want to say.
You can have Andre Johnson. If he's Andre Johnson, great player too. He was fun to watch with the Texans.
Like AJ Green, people throw out like
whichever just alien level receiver you can think of. That's Jeremiah Smith, and boy, we got 2 more years of him in college. And
this is stupid that we have 2 more years of him. It's amazing. It was great for us college football fans.
Who in the hell can cover him? Man,
I don't know how he gets better from this.
One-on-one, you can't cover him. He said it himself.
He was the #1 recruit out of high school and the highest rated wide receiver ever, and yet he's already lived his life. Already. Like, this is the guy who entered college with like Trevor Lawrence levels of recruiting hype. And like Lawrence after his freshman year, is like, yep, that's why. That's why he's the #1 player out of high school. That's why he's the highest rated wide receiver to ever come out of high school. The most valuable wide receiver in the country, according to wins above average metric. 15 receiving touchdowns, led all Power 4 receivers as well. The best player in the nation going into next year. He's already lived with the hype. And Dalton, it's shown why. Stars matter. 5 stars matter. Jeremiah Smith at number 8.
Sometimes.
All right, number 7 overall. A guy who actually held Jeremiah Smith in check in that playoff game. Jeanty Barron, the best corner, pure corner in the country. We'll, of course, get to another guy later on in the list who is just a freak athlete overall. But Jeanty Barron, the best corner in the country. Spent the majority of his career at a little bit of safety in the slot for Texas. He moved to the outside this year and was the best DB in college football. The most valuable non-quarterback in the nation, according to our wins above average metric. 90.8 PFF grade, led all cornerbacks in the Power 4. Only a 33.1 passer rating allowed. For reference, if a quarterback spikes the ball every play, he gets a 39.6 passer rating. Quarterbacks were better off spiking the football than throwing it at Jeanty Barron. That's how freaking dominant this guy was this year. The best corner in the country.
Yeah, and it's just amazing we saw Andrew Makuba on this list earlier, and Malik Muhammad's a great player on the other side, and Michael Taft is safety. They went from their secondary being the biggest weakness on last year's team, a team that also made the Final Four, to having the best secondary in the country, and Barron was the biggest reason for it. So sound in all the zone coverages that Pete Kwiatkowski ran at Texas, and they were the best team, and that's why they kept themselves in the game against Ohio State. The best team in the country at preventing explosive plays downfield. Barron was a huge part of that. Absolutely lights out. I'd expect him to be a first-round pick in April, but just the best player, just like we said with Kelvin Banks, the best player on the best secondary in the country was Jeanty Barron.
So, Dalton, we got the first of 2 Nittany Lions here at number 6 and number 5. Who is number 6 for us?
The best edge defender in the country this year. I know Mike Green was the highest graded, but when you consider, again, the level of competition in the Big Ten and then what he continued to do in the playoffs, at times with one arm at his disposal, Abdul Carter. I mean, he's being talked about as a potential #1 overall pick for a reason. I mean, 64 pressures this year. One of the best pass rush, I believe the second best pass rush grade among all edges behind Mike Green. Just a ridiculous year, and in his first year moving to full-time edge defender after playing linebacker, right, in his first 2 years. And there was times where you could see when they would blitz him at linebacker, especially in 2023, and you go, man, kind of might want to see him off the edge, and they did it full time. It's you're going to hear comparisons to Micah Parsons throughout this process because that's really what he did, and he was just unbelievable against any competition they went against. Especially, I go back to the Notre Dame game in the playoff, and I know they lost the game, but he was playing with one arm. He kept putting up the Darth Vader thing on Instagram and all of that. But no, just a freak player. the most dangerous pass rusher in college football this season, Abdul Carter from Penn State. One of their two best players, certainly their best defensive player, and the guy we have at 5 was also pretty darn good on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the comparisons with Micah Parsons are going to be a lot. And listen, it makes sense. They both went to Penn State, both were the famous number 11 at Penn State, and both then made the transition from off-ball linebacker to edge defender. Difference is, though, Micah did it in the NFL. Penn State probably saw, because there were times when Micah was at Penn State and he blitzed, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not a linebacker blitzing. That's a true defensive lineman. And Micah was listed as a defensive end coming out of high school, but because of what they needed him to play linebacker, and he was still the best linebacker in the country. Abdul showed the same thing in his first 2 years, and Penn State was smart to say, hey, we're not going to let this happen again where he gets to the NFL and is immediately one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. We're going to do it in his last year of college football, and it worked out beautifully for them. The most valuable edge in the nation. You mentioned it, 64 pressures, third among all edges in the nation, and still pretty good as a run defender in terms of making plays in the backfield. He had 13 tackles for loss or no gain, tied for the most among Power 4 edge rushers as well. So Abdul Carter, the Darth Vader of college football, comes in at number 6. But the highest ranked Penn State Nittany Lion is Tyler Warren at number 5. So this guy carried Penn State's receiving corps. And I mean carried Penn State's receiving corps this year, because the wide receivers for Penn State were very underwhelming. Tyler Warren was not underwhelming at all. In fact, he overwhelmed defenses this year. The most valuable tight end in the country, according to our wins above average metric. He led all Power 4 tight ends in PFF grade, in receptions, in receiving yards, in receiving touchdowns, and in yards after the catch. And if that's not enough for you, he also led all tight ends in the country with 218 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, and he threw a touchdown as well. He was everything for this Penn State offense this year, and easily was one of the best tight ends in the country. And he and Harold Fannin Jr. just put up 2 legendary seasons at tight end, which is why they're 2 of the top 15 players for us.
And don't forget too, caught a touchdown while lined up at center, which is never something I thought I'd even be able to say. But no, if there's anybody along with Drew Aller that benefited from the arrival of Andy Kotelnicki, the new offensive coordinator, it's Tyler Warren, because he must have gone in there during spring ball and said, wait a minute. You have this guy, and you're not completely featuring him in everything in your offense. Just a freak of nature. And honestly, every year we get the kind of lazy comp of there's a tight end in the draft that gets compared to George Kittle. No, this is actually the one. This is the one here. And you mentioned all of the receiving, all of the statistics, but fantastic, hell of a blocker too.
Yes,
I
true.
mean, just what he does in their run game as well was so often centered around him and getting behind him, whether it was just right downhill behind him or pulling him around and having him lead block. I mean, just a complete football player, the best tight end in the Power 4, if not in the country this season, and Penn State gets nowhere near where they got this year without him.
He finished 7th in Heisman Trophy voting as a tight end. That's
ridiculous.
Crazy.
Just ridiculous.
But Dalton, there's a guy that finished a little bit higher than him in Heisman Trophy voting at number 5, and he comes in at number 4 in our list. Who is it?
4 in these rankings, and maybe number 1 on the list of most entertaining guys. Cam Skattebo from Arizona State. I mean, the engine, the heart, the soul, the culture, the everything about the Arizona State Sun Devils. Cam Skattebo. We saw it a bit last year when he transferred from Sacramento State. Arizona State was a 3-win team, and he still ran his ass off, darn near beat Caleb Williams and USC by himself. And this year, just insane. Over 1,700 rushing yards, 93.2 PFF grade, second only behind Ashton, Jeanty. 3rd most receiving yards. He's a legitimate receiving threat, even though he's a bigger power back, right? But he's got great vision. We saw him just at times carry this team early, even as they were trying to develop Sam Leavitt as the season went on. The Utah game on that Friday night early in the season was a signature, and then the effort, man, that he put in against Texas.
Oh,
I mean, if you're threw a touchdown, caught a go ball on the outside, lined up outside against Michael Taff, just get heart and soul, puking on the sideline, talking to the camera, just an absolute psychopath playing running back. But one of the most entertaining players, one of the best players in college football really for the last few years, especially the last 2 years. And the fact that he got to showcase his skills on such a big stage with Arizona State winning the Big 12 after many had picked them to be dead last in the conference. he was the heart and soul of this team. It's going to be hard to replace him no matter how much talent they have coming back. But he and Kenny Dillingham really changed the culture for the Sun Devils, and he was one of the best players in college football.
He was a culture changer. You're absolutely right. And psychopath is the perfect word for him. Just him talking to the camera after, carrying, 4 Texas defenders to the end zone. Just like, dude, this is awesome.
I mean, he just refuses to be tackled.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe it was over 100 missed tackles combined rushing and receiving for him as well. Refuses to go down. I think an NFL team is going to love him just for the demeanor that he has.
In a loaded running back class, you'd think a guy that doesn't have the best tools like Scadaboo will kind of fall behind a little bit, but he puts so much effort in. It's like he's got to be a top 5 running back in the draft.
The only thing that's going to be missing is the 40 time.
Yeah.
He'll probably run something in the 4.5s, and it'll be middle of the road as far as the rest of the group. But otherwise, I mean, you look, and again, I think he's not just an angry runner. His skills are underrated. He's got terrific vision. He's got really good feet, and again, I think his work as a receiver gets underrated because you don't usually see big power backs like that as the best receivers, but just a fantastic dual threat player, and again, the heart and soul of one of the best stories in college football this year.
Absolutely. Our highest ranked quarterback on this list checks in at number 3. That is Cam Ward from Miami. So he was a gunslinger back at his time at Incarnate Word and Washington State. He really reined it in this past year and was the best quarterback in the country for the Hurricanes. The most valuable player in the nation, according to PFF's wins above average metric. 92.9 PFF grade, led all signal callers in the country. Led the nation with 39 passing touchdowns, 4,313 passing yards. Were second in the nation. 31 big-time throws, second in the nation, of course, to Kyle McCord, the legendary Syracuse quarterback. But Cam Ward overall just was a guy that I think we were excited to see, obviously coming in as a transfer from Wazoo, but we didn't think even this was possible for him, and he showed why he's going to be maybe even the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming draft. Just unbelievable year for him this year.
The shame of it is, for as much as Kyle McCord and your Syracuse Orange got their signature win at the end of the year against them, it's a shame that we didn't get to see this offense with Cam Ward leading it in the playoff, or even in the ACC title game for that matter, because their defense definitely lagged behind, especially in the secondary. But Cam was everything they could have asked for and some. I don't think we ever could have predicted he would have been this good. It was a good situation, obviously, for him to go to. Damian Martinez coming with them. Xavier Restrepo was already there. He's their all-time leading receiver now. But Cam was unstoppable. Even in the 2 games that they lost, absolutely unstoppable. There was not a moment this year, it felt like, where he struggled. Maybe the first half of the Cal game was about it, and he still found a way to make a 25-point comeback, I believe it was. So you're just talking about a guy who had a legendary season down there in Miami. And again, it is kind of a shame for the sake of him as a player to not have seen him compete for an ACC title and get into the playoff and see what he could have done in that environment.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Cal game. I mean, the Virginia Tech game as well. There are multiple games this year where Miami was down by double-digit points, and yet you never thought they were out of it because Cam Ward. And he brought him back almost every single time as well.
Just this calm swagger about him that never wavers, right? We even saw it in the Louisville game when they got in a big shootout with them. We were on the field watching that. We're just like, this dude has no pulse.
Yeah.
He's just going to go out here and do what he does. He was fantastic.
So, Dalton, from number 3 to number 101 and beyond, there was a lot of debate between all of us, you, me, and Mitch Kaiser. Number 1 and number 2, though, there was no debate. These were easily the top 2 players in college football this year. Who was number 2?
And there's probably still a lot of debate about which one is 1 and which is 2, but we decided on Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty at 2, and there's nothing you could say other than an all-time great season. And look, we keep going back to last offseason, we got to talk to him, and he told us, hey, I'm going for 2,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. And I think he cleared 2,500 yards pretty easily, and he got over 29 touchdowns, and I think 1 or 2 more receiving. 151 forced missed tackles, PFF record. 96.6 rushing grade, PFF record. 1,970 yards after contact. Shattered every PFF rushing record that we have. I mean, what after being, I think he had the highest rushing grade in the nation in 2023. It was either first or second. To have a year like this, especially for a team that didn't have a dynamic passing game, playing at the group of 5 level, I get it, but he tore up Oregon. He still had 100 yards on Penn State, broke, 16 or 18 tackles in the playoff game against Penn State. He was unstoppable. The only way you stop Boise State's offense was to just load all 11 guys in the box and hopefully make them throw the ball and see if you can bother Maddox Madsen. But Jeanty turned in one of the greatest seasons of all time by a running back. I mean, these are some numbers. A 1,970 after contact and 150 forced missed tackles. I don't know that we're going to see that.
No.
Because what was Bijan? Had what, 106?
104.
It's just ridiculous.
He beat Bijan Robinson, who, by the way, might be not only might be, he's a top 3 running back in the NFL. He beat his forced tackle record by 47.
These are numbers that may not get touched again or even anywhere close. I mean, it's just ridiculous the season he had with the expectation that he had to come in and carry this team if they were going to make the playoff, and he actually did it, winning the Mountain West, beating UNLV twice. Their only loss in the regular season was down to the wire at the buzzer against Oregon when he teed off on Oregon. I mean, just again, there's still people arguing about which one of them should have won the Heisman, but no question who the top 2 in college football were, and we have Ashton Jeanty at 2.
He had, like I said, 1,970 yards after contact. The record was 1,355 by Jonathan Taylor. We're talking about some of the best running backs in the NFL right now that set the PFF college record, and he shattered them. He had 615 more rushing yards after contact than Jonathan Taylor. 1,970 rushing yards in general would be a phenomenal year for anyone, because usually what wins the Doak Walker Award is 1,970 yards total. He had 1,970 yards after contact.
Jeanty just after contact was the best back in the country.
Yes.
It's just silly. I mean, it's just the incredible year, the incredible career he had at Boise State. And look, Boise got a long, long line of great running backs who have been good players in the NFL. And Jeanty somehow stepped up his game and made it even better. I just can't believe when you look at some of the numbers and the performances he had, and you go back and watch his tape again, and he's just a different. That's like a different species of player out there. I don't even know what to say about him after a while. It's incredible.
Yeah, talk about different species though. That's our number 1 guy, Travis Hunter, wide receiver, corner from Colorado. Listen, Jeanty, unbelievable year this year, and one of the best running back seasons of all time. But we've at least seen it before. We've seen Barry Sanders before, right? We've never seen a player like Travis Hunter before. Simply put, he is, without a doubt, the greatest 2-way player in college football history. There is no debate, ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's other guys that have had, great 2-way years, like Charles Woodson did some stuff for Michigan, and some other really impressive, like Champ Bailey was great at Georgia as well. Nobody has been this good on both sides of the ball like Travis Hunter. 3rd among all corners in the nation with a 90.3 coverage grade. 6th among all receivers in the nation with an 89 receiving grade. 15 receiving touchdowns, tied for the most in the Power 4. 4 interceptions, tied for 5th among corners as well. Travis Hunter, the greatest 2-way player of all time. The fact that he played this many snaps and still played like a top 5 player in the country at 2 incredibly difficult positions is ridiculous. He was the best football player in the country and very deserving of the Heisman Trophy, which is saying a lot considering how amazing Ashton Jeanty was this year. I still thought Travis Hunter was clearly the deserving Heisman Trophy winner.
I really think straight up just one of the most special athletes that's ever stepped on a football field. And I know there's been the debate about it. Should he play receiver? Should he play corner? I go, he hasn't shown you so far that he can't do both. I would go ahead and let him do both at a pretty high clip in the NFL. I think he could just be one of the most special athletes we've ever seen, and you mentioned it. Lights out at corner, big time at receiver, at least one of the 3 or 4 best receivers in college football. You could argue number 1. I mean, you just watch him. It just looks like he moves in a different manner than everybody else. I think as a receiver, he really has like Justin Jefferson type of potential, which is why I think a lot.
And he might be a better corner,
and he might be the best corner in the NFL. I really right now I've got him wide receiver 1 and CB1 in this draft in the same body. I mean, I don't even know. It's a fascinating case study to see if more guys could come up and do this, but I would highly doubt there's very many. He's just so special, and I think what gets lost too, because he has to play both ways, and then I think he uses some of the knowledge that he has on the other side of the ball, on each side, like what he knows about coverages, he can use at receiver to pick it apart, and vice versa about pass concepts. I just think this is a player you're not going to see very many of, if any more of, in our lifetime. I mean, you just don't get guys at this level that dominate on both sides of the ball like that.
I think he's probably the most athletic player in college football, and I would also say he's probably the smartest player in college football. The fact that he is just such an intellectual player out there on 2 sides of the football is just absolutely ridiculous. I was watching an interview on the Rich Eisen show recently with Warren Sapp, who's on there, who's one of the coaches in Colorado. He's been around a lot of legendary players like Ray Lewis in his time in Miami and a bunch of other guys in the NFL. He goes, man, Travis is just different. Like he's like, I actually told him in one of our meetings, like, it's a blessing to
There's
coach.
certain times I watch him and people, and you'd go like, okay, what's the comp for Travis Hunter? And I'm like, I don't know, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like legitimately, like that's the level of freak that he is. I mean, you could go back all the way to week 1, that catch he made in the end zone against North Dakota State. There was a ridiculous contested catch against I can't think of, was it against Oklahoma State?
Yes.
When he's like horizontal
yeah.
and he still caught the ball double. I mean, he just
The interceptions, the
interceptions,
forced fumble on the goal line against Baylor.
the game-winning play against Baylor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything. It's constant headiness along with the athleticism that did. I think it did make him the best player in the country.
This was truly an all-time Heisman Trophy race. We're going to look back on this. There's probably a 30 for 30 made about this Heisman Trophy race between Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty. I know, if you're a Hunter fan, you're trying to take down Jeanty. If you're a Jeanty fan, you're trying to take down Hunter. Just respect and just appreciate both these guys
And
for what they did.
So much fun to watch the emotional roller coaster of Eli with his Ashton Jeanty Heisman bet. That was really the best part, watching that week-to-week swing every single week when Jeanty would go for 200.
75 to 1 odds he got it at, right?
Something crazy like that. And he was so darn close. If you had it any other year.
We told him to cash out. Many times told him to cash out. You let it ride, which I can't blame you for Ashton Jeanty. But
that's why we're here and he's back there.
Yeah, that's what we got, though, for our top 101 players in college football from the 2024 college football season. Of course, kind of puts a bow on our 2024 season coverage, but we got a lot more stuff coming here on this channel for the 2025 NFL Draft, and of course, previewing everything for the 2025 college football season. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of it. We're doing about 2 episodes a week now on this channel. We're going to start with our draft rankings next week as well. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that. For producer Eli back there, for Dalton Wassman, I'm Max Chadwick, and we'll see you guys very soon.